Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's webinar session on Assessments, a Total Overview. So before we can dive into the content, I do want to make a disclaimer that in case you are considering the assessment tool, this is something that is available only within our Pro packages and above at the moment. And also do note that this session is going to be a bit more of an advanced session. So for anybody who has not taken our Getting Started with SoGoSurvey session, I would strongly recommend starting there because in there, we will go over all of the basics, such as going over the basics of being able to design the survey, create questions, delete questions, distribute your survey, and an intro into basic reports. So due to the limitations of time, of course, we will not be able to go over all of those basics. So in this, we will be focusing purely on the assessment side of things. So with that out of the way, I do want to, of course, introduce myself as your host for today's webinar session. My name is Rob Delion. I'm a technical support engineer here with the SoGoSurvey team located here in Herndon, Virginia. And of course, we'll be guiding you kind of through the ins and outs of the assessment tool, showing you how to make, totals of your results. So with that, let's go ahead and hop right into the content here. And this is going to be one of the main things that we're going to be focusing on today. So for everybody, we're assuming that you have at least a basic understanding of the platform itself, at least the general survey platform. So we're going to be taking a look at what's the differences specifically between what the assessment tool can do versus our survey tool. So what are the differences here? So the first bullet point here is talking about this concept of score versus weights. So within the survey tool, we already have a weighting system that is available. So this is tied to any question type with the word rating in it. So your rating radio button, your rating scale, rating drop-down grids, and so on and so forth. All those types of questions, essentially where you can have numbers associated with it. But at the same time, in assessment tool, we do allow scores within more question types, so you can actually manually assign scores onto them. And kind of the differences between these use case will come around the fact that with the weights, this is specifically more focused on averages, whereas what we're going to see today with scores, we're going to be looking at totals and sums, essentially. So that's going to be one of the key differences that on why you would use the assessment side versus the weights, or the assessment side versus the survey side. And of course, as the name implies, with it being an assessment, you usually think of an assessment, something like a test, for example. So you do have the option with these scores and the assessments and the questions here to actually mark answer options as either correct or incorrect, and even be able to do things like assign partial credits. So if you're doing something like a multiple select checkbox question type, that is an option as well. And of course, we've all been through kind of the school life, and so we know how it is that what would a test be if there wasn't time limits. So of course, you do have the option there to be able to restrict and set time limits within your assessments as well. And lastly here, what we can also do with the assessment tool is that we can actually group up our questions by categories. So kind of going on that same school theme here, let's say that we had a set of questions that was under mathematics, one under geography, one under science, English, so on and so forth. So we can actually take those groups of questions together, categorize them and actually report on them based on category. So I could, once I get to the end of the survey, I could tell them that essentially, here's your score. This is how you did within the math category. Here's how you did within geography, and so on and so forth. And not only that, but that allows us also a couple of extra interesting things that we'll be taking a look at here on the next slide. So we'll talk about this first one right here. So talking about pretty much more on the reporting and the results side here. So one of the differences that between the assessment tool and the survey tool is that the reports that we're going to be looking at on the assessment side, it is much more geared towards an individual basis, where you're looking at those responses on a person by person basis. Whereas the survey tool, usually most of the time, you're looking more at kind of those group results, those collected results. So looking at everybody's responses in terms of graphs, like an aggregate. So we'll definitely be taking a look more at the individual here. And then this one right here, custom results page. So this was actually alluding to that last point that I was just talking about, the last page. And so what this allows you to do is that depending on how people perform within an assessment or how they score, you can actually create different custom messages for them at the very end. So what's known as the thank you page under the survey tool is replaced by the results page instead. And so now, since you can create these custom messages, let's say that if someone scored a specific way under the math category or geography category, I could actually provide them a different message at the very end of the survey based on how they scored. So that is going to be some of the interesting functionality that you can do. And then this last point right here is going to be talking about the two specific reports that we're going to be taking a look at. So the assessment summary and the individual report. So these two are going to be different in the assessment tool versus the survey tool. So with that, of course, let's go ahead and hop into the platform itself so that I can show you specifically what these differences look like. But before we do that, let's go ahead and we'll talk about just some of the housekeeping and some of the high level side of things in terms of some of the differences that you might see over here. So we're of course looking at the home screen of my personal account that I'm logged into. And so in terms of, let's start with the process of actually taking a look and creating assessments. Everything is pretty much the same for the most part. So as you notice right here, under recent projects, I have a couple that are ready right here. And one of the key differences that you'll be able to tell, at least once you're in there, is that you're gonna have a different color theme. So whereas you might be used to this blue with the survey tool, everything is gonna be denoted by essentially this purple here. But how we make an assessment is all we need to do is go right here into create project. And then you can see that we've got the assessment tool right there. And so we would just basically go through this process and create it just like normal. So nothing different on that side of things. So let's go ahead, we will hop into this one right here. And so now we can see that we're within the same side of things. So just like the survey tool, so we're under the designer mode, and you can see that that purple theme carries throughout here. So that way we know that we are specifically under the assessment tool. So the whole process, everything creation is exactly the same in this case. So you've got all your same question types over here and so on and so forth, same drag and drop. So from this side, it looks very similar, but the key difference is, of course, is that now we have this button over here called assign scores. So what we can do is we can click into here. And now we are in our page where we can actually assign scores. So as you can see from this example, we're taking on that school kind of theme here with an academic assessment. So we've got some math questions, geography, there's some science and biology questions, and then some general knowledge down here. So as you can see, we could go through here and I could simply just do things like I could assign points here. So I could say that this is the right one. These are all the wrong ones, so on and so forth. So I could always just go through, manually assign my scores like so. But of course, we're not limited to just that. So if we actually take a look right here, it's a little bit hidden, but there's a settings button right here. So if we click on this, so here becomes that option to be able to categorize questions, kind of like what we were talking about. So now I can enable this here. And so we'll review this one first. I'm going to hit done. And now I can begin building all of my categories right here. So this is going to be my first category, which I'm going to do as math. And then now that I have this set up, I can go ahead and select the questions that are assigned to this category. So I'm going to select basically everything on page 2 here. So these two, or you just use the checkbox that's tied to math. I'm going to do another page here. This one is for geography, which is everything under page 3 in this case. So I'm just going to select that. Add category. This one I could say this is my science category. And this one is tied to page 4. So, and the last one, this one's going to be our general knowledge. And this is everything on page 5. All right, so now that we have that there, we can go ahead, I'm going to hit save first. Make sure that that gets saved there. And let's go ahead and we can actually click on each of these categories and we'll be able to see all the questions that are assigned under each category, of course. And then we can also click on all questions. So there we go. Now we have everything here. So that's how the categories are set up. So let's go into how we could do maybe some of the scoring. specifically with the correct and incorrect answers. So as you saw, we can already go ahead and just manually assign numbers like that. But let's see, this one right here is actually a multiple select question type. So if you wanted to do something like partial credit, as I mentioned earlier, what you can do is that you can just essentially, let's say that we wanted this to be a total of 6 points. So if we wanted to, then we could assign, maybe 2 points here. And then we could say that this one is equal to 2 points right there too. And then this one is 2 points, so on and so forth. So that's one way that you can do partial credit. And so let's go ahead now, we'll take a look at the correct and incorrect answer options here. So what we can do here is that now we can assign a specific score for all correct answers and also incorrect answers. So let's say that if we wanted to do 5 points for correct answers, we could do that. Then anything that's incorrect, basically, we could leave it as 0. Or even if you are feeling like, one of those difficult tests from the past that you might remember, you can also even do negative values when you're assigning scores as well too. But in this case, we'll leave it just as 0 for this example. And then in this case here, so I already have this one here, but if I did correct here, so you can't see it, but this filled out everything else. But let's go ahead, we'll go down here. So this one, if I select this one right here, you can see that all those values get auto-populated right there for all the incorrect and the correct answer options. So in this case, if we were to do this over here, you'll see that unfortunately we won't be able to use partial credit using this option here, because if we select all these, so let's say that these need to all be the correct ones. So you can see that it does mark it here so that it basically requires that all answer options, or if any answer option is incorrect. So you'd have to use a little bit of a mix of the two in order to be able to do anything with partial credit for this specific use case. But I can go through here and I could just mark off the rest of these and so on and so forth. So I can do this one, this one, this one, and this one. And like so. And so that is everything with assigning questions. And of course, once you're done with everything, just double check that everything is correct. And we can go ahead and hit save and return to designer. And just like that, we are done with the first part now of assigning scores. So scores versus weights, essentially. So let's go ahead, we'll take a look at some of the other options that we can do. So they are located here under this options cogwheel right here. So let's go ahead, we'll hop down to display options, which is going to be one of the other ones that we had talked about. And as you can see right here, right away, I actually already have it enabled in here, but you can assign a timer. So this is going to be that time limit. So you get to enter in that time limit. So if you wanted to give them only, we'll do it maybe 10 minutes instead. We could do like so. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And also do note that, depending on how you want to administer this test, maybe you don't want to allow people to be able to go back into the survey, since this is a bit more of an evaluation. But in most cases, people probably are, but just in case you want to do that, you can always do other things like disable the back button, but I'm going to leave that on. We'll go ahead and hit save. And then where we can see this now is if we go into preview. So if we click on the little eye icon, just like within the survey tool, you can see here in this assessment that right away, we've got that timer right there ticking away. So just like that, we have now enabled a time limit onto here. And once that time limit runs out, basically the responses with how far did they've reached will automatically be submitted. So with that, let's go ahead. We will hop back into here. And so now we're going to go ahead and hop into the results page over here, which, as mentioned, this is replacing what's known as the thank you page in the survey tool. So at first glance, you can see that it looks very similar to the thank you page here. So you've got your same thank you message, your account email that's tied to your account that's automatically piped into here, and so on and so forth. But of course, we have more options down here. So what we can do is that if I change this from a static thank you message that pops up at the very end of the survey, I can switch this over to a custom message. And so now we have a header for our custom message. This is the body over here, and then the footer. So the header and the footer will always be attached to every custom message, but the body can change depending on how they score specifically. So as I mentioned here, you can do different messages depending on their score. So by default, as shown right here, we have essentially what is a pass-fail criteria. So this is going to be the message that pops up if they pass, and then this is going to be the one that pops up if they fail. So let's go ahead. We can maybe edit some of these values if we want to. So I can do edit. If I want to change this value to maybe 50% instead, I could do so like that. And then I could save. Then we could do the same thing over here. We can make this 50% here. But of course, that is, if we wanted to keep it basic like that, but as you might expect, there is a lot more we can do with here. So let's go ahead. We will change this one. I'm going to edit this to show you kind of what else you can do. So as you can see, we can also specify multiple criterias for the condition. So this first condition gets labeled C1, but not only that, but you can see that this is just for your general overall percentage. If I actually check this, you can see now that all those categories, I can set specific criteria for all these categories right here. So let's say that if I wanted to do, we'll do math score obtained greater than or equal to 50, and then I'm going to add another. Actually, this needs to be percentage, so math percentage, because we had our values set to 5 points per question. So we wouldn't be able to get 50 in one category, even if we tried as much as possible. And then let's do it for this one. We'll do geography in this case, percentage, and we'll do greater than or equal to 50 as well here. All right, so we've got that there. And so now this is going to be our logic essentially that we set up between these conditions. So in this case, let's say that we want for it to match both C1 and C2, so we could do all conditions. You also have any conditions and also custom combinations of conditions. So just in case you're familiar with some of the ways that you can do the branching logic or the filtering logic, this is very similar in that case. So you can actually type out, as you can see right here, is this example, you can actually type out these condition numbers. So I can actually type out in parentheses C1 and C2 or C3, basically get to use whatever logic operators. But we don't need that in this use case. So we're gonna keep it a little bit simpler. So let's say all conditions. And then, so now I've got this default message here, and I can expand on this a lot more. So this is the default message, but what we have here is that we actually have the pipe answers and scores button also available here. So let's say that I wanted to break this down into more details. So I'm going to say your category are as follows. And then so I'm going to say here, I'm going to start labeling these. I'm going to say your math, geography, and then I'm going to do science, general knowledge. And what I can do here is that now that I have this button here, I can actually pipe in all those specific scoring variables. So I could say right here, I have these available, or alternatively, just like with regular piping that's available within the survey platform, you can always just pipe in just their direct answer options as well. But in this case, for this example, I'm going to use right here the score. So I'm going to say this is their math score, and I could say out of, and then I can pipe in the maximum math score, and probably type in points. In the geography, I can do the same thing. So I'm going to do geography score out of whatever points. So maximum geography score right there, and so on and so forth. So just for example, I'm just going to do those two, and then I'm going to go ahead and save it now. So, and now just to show how this would look, let's go ahead and do a preview here. So if I'm going to go to preview, and I'm going to answer these. So I'm just going to go through here. Answered a little CAPTCHA. Oh, it still thinks I'm a robot. Let's go ahead and we'll try it again. Oh, it still thinks I'm a robot. We don't want robots inside of our test because robots can cheat, potentially, right? There we go. So now we are in. And let's go ahead and we're going to answer these because not because I already instantly know the answers to all of these, but, and then this one's Asia. So that's going to get us our pass criteria right now because those are the two categories that we have set up. So in this one, really everything else should not matter because we should already have enough to meet that pass message. All right, so I have created this little final review page within here, and now I'm going to submit. And so there you go. You can see right there, since of course I got a perfect score in this case, so, or at least in these two categories. I believe I got perfect score for these as well too. Actually 50 points, yep, because we did 5 points for everything and we had 10 questions. So it shows you all that information right there. So just like that, we can also add a little bit more onto this page if we want to as well. So if we actually go back over here, if you look south of the results page, you can see that we can also provide them different category score graphs as well too. So that is available. So now if we do that, now that I've saved, I'm going to quickly go through this one more time. See if it'll let us in. First try. Nope, still not. All right, let's go ahead. You're going to give me the pictures? There we go. So now we're going to do the same thing here. And maybe let's do a couple of these not exactly correct here. So it's going to do this one. We'll still go for the pass message here, but I'm going to mix it up just a little bit and we'll see what kind of result we get. So now if I hit submit, okay, so there you go. You can see that this time I only got 5 out of 10 points and 5 out of 10 as well right there. And now you can see that I've got that category score graph right there, letting me know how I performed in each of those specific categories. So that is going to be everything on the results page side of things. So let's go ahead. We'll hop into the next section of distribution just to quickly take a glance over it. And so everything on the distribution front is going to be exactly the same. The only small, very minute difference, aside from the color scheme once again, is going to be the fact that what you might have been familiar with as track survey is just called track assessment in this case. But everything else will be the same over there. So with that, let me actually go ahead and switch gears because we now need one with responses so that we can take a look at the next part with our reports. All right, so this one, of course, I am now looking at this version of the exact same assessment that we were just looking at, but now we have responses in here. So Omni report we will not be going over, of course, since this is what's covered under more of the survey tool side of things, but the two reports of concern that we're going to be taking a look at that are unique to using the scoring side from the assessment tool involves the two under raw data. So individual report and assessment summary. So let's start with individual report because this is actually a report that is available within the survey tool as well. But there is a couple of extra additions in the assessment side of things. So we are now within kind of one of our traditional report creation processes right here. So each step laid out by each block here. So the first step is going to be, what questions do I want shown in the report? So in this case, we're probably going to want everything, but let's not jump too far ahead. If you actually notice up here, we've got this button. If I toggle this on, now this breaks it down into all those categories that we have set up. So let's select everything here. And then down here, you can see that I've got a lot of different metrics I can begin enabling here. So I'm just going to enable everything to showcase here. So I'm going to do it for every category here. And so on and so forth. In case you need to reorder these within the report, you can always toggle this on and it'll take you to another page which will allow you to reorder it. But I'm going to skip that. So we'll hit continue. And then nothing much here that we can do on this side of things. Continue. And just like with traditional reports, we can also do filters on this if we want. But in this case, we're not going to do anything. So we're going to just go ahead and continue and run it as is. And so now we are looking at the individual report. So of course, this looks very similar to the one that you might be used to under the survey tool. So past the surveys, metrics, and the properties and filters, you can see that down here, we have everybody's response. So pretty much on a one-on-one basis. So each person, just like with the individual report, you can see on a separate page here. And here it basically shows you the point value and how they did. So let's go to somebody who actually didn't get a perfect score here. So in this case right here, so you can see basically how they scored. So this was worth 0 points. So they received 0 there, -2, so on and so forth. But since that is a little bit hard to read, what we can do is that if we go back up here, if I edit the properties here, there's an option to show questions as correct or incorrect. So this is granted that we have used that correct or incorrect option back in the assigned score section. So if I do this, now I get, a little bit of helpful visuals in this case. And so you can see that, or actually this person didn't get a perfect score. So you can see they actually got 1 off there. But definitely helps in terms of visuals when you're going through this side of things. And there is a couple of other things that we can do here as well too. So if you actually go back up here, what we can do is we can also enable some graphs in here too. So if we do this and this will look very familiar to what we had just seen under the results page. So scrolling down, you can see now that I've enabled 2 graphs. So each of those check boxes that I just did here. So this first one right here is going to be that same kind of performance graph that we saw based on each category. So you can see that this one, that multiple select really hurt them there. So -10 in that case. But what this does is that not only did they get to see their performance in each of the categories, but down here, this also provides a benchmark graph. And so this average score, of course, is going to be the actual average score of all the participants who participate in this assessment. So you can get a good idea on how you performed versus everybody who took this assessment in this case. So you can see in this case that this person excelled over here in mathematics and geography, but versus the average, they're a bit under with science and biology and general knowledge in this case. So that is going to be the assessment, or the individual report. So with that, let's go ahead. We will move into the last report, which is known as the assessment summary. So this one actually replaces the response table report type that is in the survey tool, but in terms of layout, it is going to be very similar in that it's going to give us a tabular format in this case. So as you can see, we have a very similar setup process to what we just saw once again. So I'm just going to go ahead, toggle everything on, all questions, add all the different variables here. Geography, science and biology, general knowledge. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and just hit generate now. So just like with the other reports under the survey tool, the generate now button is there if you're familiar with pretty much all the defaults, because it'll run it with all the defaults from here on out. So if you know you don't need to make any other changes, you can go ahead and just hit that. And so just like the last report, we've got all of our metrics, properties, and filters. And then down here, we have the actual report itself. So once again, just like the response table that you might be familiar with, now we have every respondent on each row right here. And every column right here is a question or one of the metrics that we're looking at right here. So you can see that here's everything under mathematics right there. So there's a score earned, percentage earned, possible score, average score, and so on and so forth. And of course, you've got a full list of all the totals all the way at the very end as well too. And as you can see, this brings over nothing but numbers. So specifically those scores that you've assigned under design, under assigned scores get carried over here. So no words, no text, just those scores over here. But of course, when you're working with numbers, it is hard once again to necessarily know unless you memorize specifically, a 10 is going to be a correct answer option and so on and so forth. So we do have the same option just like before that we could show answers as correct or incorrect. And also I'm going to enable this one as well too, which will show us more averages in here. So I'm going to apply. And just like before, we have all of those visual aids right there. So for every question, we've got all the correct or incorrect marks right there. And that average that I just enabled, so that gives us the averages shown right here at the top of each column. So that is that one that's been added onto there as well. But that is going to be all for the assessments. So with that, thank you very much, everybody, for your time today. So in case you have any questions, feel free to reach out to our support team. You can reach us 24/7 through email specifically at support1@SoGoSurvey.com. And just as a disclaimer, of course, everything within this presentation here today is subject to change since, of course, we are constantly making changes to our platform and system. So we're making a lot of strides in terms of upgrading a lot of things, especially on the reporting side of things. So definitely, if you want to get the latest and most up-to-date information, feel free to request a live session of one of these, and we can help also potentially address any maybe specific questions you have on these webinars as well too. With that, I thank you all for your time today and have a great rest of your day. Take care, everyone.